Naughty boys in nasty schools, headmasters breaking all the rules, having fun and playing fools, smashing up the woodwork. All the teachers in the pub, passing man a ready rub, trying not to think of when that lunchtime bell will ring.
Throughout the history of cinema, the ideas of what can and cannot be shown on screen have constantly shifted. In the early 1900s, moral panic was enforced by local censorship boards to restrict working-class citizens being able to access materials and ideas that went against religious and governmental doctrine.
And better motion pictures so that they may all stay.
Films that promoted sexual content or the glamorization of violence were strictly restricted or banned, especially after the introduction of the Hays Code in the 1930s.
Standards of performance for motion picture producers.
An industry-imposed system designed to limit governmental regulation and replace it with their own flavour of censorship. This led to the idea of inferred violence coming along, stuff that you couldn't show on screen instead being conveyed by editing or cinematography tricks to allude to the violent or disgusting stuff that you couldn't see. But there was one rule of cinema that, despite never being written in any codes, existed as an unspoken law. You didn't kill kids, or at least not on screen. I mean, unless you wanted to.
Hit it, boys!
Don't kill children, don't run them over. Let them live their life, let them get older. Don't kill children, don't run them over. Let them live their life, let them get older. Brand is wrong, he didn't do anything wrong. He was running wild.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. The concept of infanticide is nothing particularly new to cinema. Infanticide has been exhibited in film as early as 1916, with The Awakening of Helena Richie. But the concept of depicting the on-screen trauma or death of a child is something that audiences and filmmakers have only recently become accepting of, despite the fact that some very early classics were thematically all about infanticide. So when did showing violence to children become socially acceptable? Is there a specific reason in film that justifies this violence, or is it more that our social perspectives have shifted enough that the concept isn't as shocking as it was 100 years ago? It's not as though social perceptions of actual violence to actual children has become any less horrifying, so how have filmmakers managed to create sensationalized violence to minors somehow less forbidden and more fantastic? And that's not my own desensitivity speaking. There's enough evidence in recent pop culture to show that sometimes we enjoy watching kids get their turn on the horror chopping block. Today I'm going to run through different examples of how modern films position the audience into either accepting or ultimately encouraging something that we used to abhor. And we're going to start that off with The Exorcist. Now, while the child character Regan doesn't actually die in this film, she is subjected to what can only be described as torture, and it's one of the first examples of a young character being treated so brutally in film, a mainstream film that reportedly made up to $441 million for its multiple releases. The film follows a young girl, Regan, who's revealed to have been possessed through her use of a Ouija board. The film then shows the suffering that both Regan and the people around her experience because of it, and the ultimate expulsion of the demon from its host, not before it spins her head and paints most of the room green. Now, this film created such a buzz on its release due to the abject horror of seeing this young character in such a state, with reports of faintings and nausea from audience members.
They look like they're
But there are multiple clever ways that the film positions you into an acceptance of this violence, so that you come away thinking, wow, that was awful and amazing, and not, wow, that was so awful it should be banned.
Fainted or gotten sick. I guess it shows how far some people will go for the thrill of being chilled to the bone.
The first of these is through the separation of Regan's character. The choice of changing her voice, her physical appearance, and her mannerisms slowly through the film's runtime creates a juxtaposition between the young girl and the physical body that is receiving this abuse, making it more justifiable as it is no longer against the child, but instead something far more sinister. The writers also cleverly portray the demon's dialogue as goading and encouraging of the actions taken to stop it, making the violence seem deserved or just a backlash against a greater force. It comes to a point in the film where you forget that the antagonist is also the protagonist. The lines become blurred and all the audience sees is an evil that must be snuffed. The use of religion is also essential in the positioning of the audience. You feel for the young girl, of course, but you're suckered into that conviction that this force must be wiped out regardless of the cost. That is what God demands, and through incredibly repetitive chanting, it might be achieved.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ!
The entire film is encouraging this evil to be destroyed. The audience is already in that state of acceptance. Which is why this film is a great example that through clever messaging, within the right circumstances, and with enough stress added to a situation, you'll find yourself accepting an idea that on entering the cinema, or even at the start of the film, you would have found that idea despicable. Now, we've talked about acceptance, so let's talk about encouragement. When a filmmaker uses clever tricks to make you not only okay with a kid dying, but make you kind of hope it happens. Take this kid, from our example Final Destination Bloodlines. At this point in cinema, most audiences have learned how to separate on-screen violence from real-life violence, so you're encouraged to slowly root against this kid, even more so when his rude comments and subsequent penny dropping are revealed to be the cause for the film's disaster.
You kill somebody.
Oh, I'm so sorry, of course. Yeah. Fat ass.
The film also allows the room for questioning those darker thoughts, appearing to spare the twerp as he successfully makes it down the emergency stairs before running out the door, making it a few smug steps before the piano of public satisfaction turns him into an E flat. Ba-dum-ching. Both of these examples, while very different, show how film has managed to push the boundaries of social taboo, allowing humanity to play out darker scenarios while still keeping the moral high ground, and successfully showing that sometimes it's okay to kill kids.